Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and as usual, we got another good one for you today. Today, we connect with Cody Rich. Cody is a podcaster, entrepreneur. He's been doing this longer than most folks. In fact, he's one of the first people that I found when I really decided that I wanted to take my elk hunting to the next level. That being said, I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, but check him out on Instagram, check out his podcast, check out all the stuff that he's doing because it's really cool stuff. There are links to everything in the show notes. Beyond that, I'm going to say it here at the beginning of the podcast. Get out there and give us a review, share with a friend to make sure people are finding us. But that's it, guys. Let's go ahead and kick this thing off and, let Cody tell you some of his stories. All right, Cody, welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you?
Good, man. I'm really good. I'm stoked to be here. And I love this concept of like just hunting stories. And, on my podcast, I would say like, man, stories do really well. And we were kind of joking before the podcast, but I was like, you were saying how most people feel like they're rambling, and I'm like, that's so true. Like as a podcast host, you're like, no, ramble, like tell a good story. So hopefully I can do your podcast justice and tell a good story. I don't know. I don't consider myself a great storyteller, so we'll see.
I've had plenty of people on that say that exact same thing, and they're in some of my favorite episodes. So I bet you do a lot better than you think. That being said, I want to start off by letting you introduce yourself, but I want to mention something that I said to you before the podcast, which is you're one of the first people that like I dove into your content that you put out there to like become an elk hunter. Before I discovered who Cody Rich was, honestly, it was going to camp, drinking beer, and then walking around in the woods. Like the buddies I was with, we didn't even know what thermals were until all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, there's a lot more to this. So I'm super excited to have you here, but let's let you introduce yourself real quick so that the listeners know who they're hearing some stories from.
Yeah. So my name is Cody Rich. I host the Rich Outdoors podcast. I also do now it's called the Elk Hunt podcast, but for a long time it was just called Wapiti Wednesday. We still do both of those, but kind of specialize in elk. I've been an elk fanatic since I can remember. I always, grew up. I wouldn't say I grew up in like premier elk country. I grew up in Oregon. We were kind of on a small farm tucked against the coastal range, so I hunted Roosevelts most of my life. But yeah, hunted in Oregon. Grew up loving elk, reading Bugle magazine. My dad was obsessed with elk hunting. So yeah, it's kind of where I got my start, and still to this day, just as much time as I can elk hunting. This year I got like 3 tags. So not much has changed.
Yeah. And one of the cool things about what you do is there's a lot of levels of entrepreneurship to, it's not just, learn this about elk, learn that about mule deer. You really help people kind of change their lives through entrepreneurship so they can hunt more, which is an awesome concept. And it hits home for me, partly why I'm doing this. So don't
totally. And yeah, that's most of everything I've done in my life was a decision on how to hunt more, how to be able to elk hunt, do all these things. And since I was 18 years old, every decision has kind of been made on the back of like, does this allow me to elk hunt? And, the years of that and kind of building my life around, being able to hunt as much as I can, which nowadays looks more, like hanging out with my kids as much as I can. But it's all that like building the life you want. And so I talk a lot about that. And to me, like entrepreneurship is kind of a great way to do that. I personally not a very good employee. So I couldn't go work for someone.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. So like I said, that stuff is great, but it's not what we're here for today. Like
Right.
You probably talk about that stuff all the time. So let's just throw that all out the window. But check out Cody's stuff, of course, if you're interested in that, because it's super cool. I particularly like the stuff when like people come to you with business plans and then you rip them apart. And I'm like, God, I love that. But that's not why we're here. We're here to hear some hunting stories, Cody. And that's all we do here. So why don't we set the stage for your first story? I think you said you've got one really good one, and then we'll kind of wing it from there. But set the stage for story number 1.
So I'm actually going to circle that. We'll call it story number 2 will be my more popular story. And it's, I don't know if we can say this, but it's a total shit show rodeo of a hunt, which is always the best hunting stories. And it works out well, but, and that's going to be, an elk hunt that I did, I think it was 2016. So it's feels like a couple years ago, but I guess it was more than that. But to kind of set the stage, I talked about growing up elk hunting and being a diehard elk hunter. I thought it'd be kind of cool. I don't know if I've ever told this story on a podcast, but going back to the very first elk hunt I ever did. So
Perfect.
I had kind of told a lot of people that, my dad was avid elk hunter. Like he absolutely loved elk hunting, was obsessed with it. And like a lot of people's, parents, whatever, grandparents, in that time, it was all like, you just put meat in the freezer. Like as much as they loved to hunt horns, it was like, you didn't pass a pass. My dad would roll over in his grave if he ever found out how many elk got passed up. Like that was unheard of thing. Right. And, I think he had killed like 16 or 17 bulls, and 99% of them were all spikes, like they were really good spike hunters. And that was like back in those days, that's what it was. And I talk a little bit about how, for me, not getting to go hunting was as big of a motivator as getting to go. Like, I know it's important to take your kids hunting. And since I was 2 or 3 years old, before I could even remember, my dad used to take us deer hunting out back, and we had some property we could deer hunt behind the house. And, he'd take us, and, we wanted to go, and me and my brother, we'd want to go every time, but we didn't get to, and that kind of comes into
my son is too. He's 3 right now, and he's like, Dad, can I come? And I'm like, can you hike up that mountain? He's like, oh, maybe next time. He understands his physical limitations, fortunately. But sorry,
mine does not, because my 4-year-old, like, he's convinced he has a bighorn tag, and he's got an elk tag in Canada this year. I don't know where that came from, but yeah, he's like dead set. And I mean, he can keep up. He can do a lot of these things, but I think it just crushes him when he can't go. And like me, I remember those days of not getting to go. And I remember like sitting there waiting for dad to get back. And this was like pre-cell phones and all that. So my dad used to go to elk camp every single year. They used to go, for those who know Oregon, Ukiah was the unit they hunted. And, they'd go to the Ukiah unit, which is 5 or 6 hours away from where we lived. And so they were gone for like a week. And then, you're waiting by the door knowing he's going to get home on Friday. And you're like waiting and waiting. And, that was a huge piece of it. Just like, waiting to see what they got. It wasn't like we got text messages of the pictures like today, And so none of us, so I think my cousins, me, and then my little brother, none of us could go to elk camp until we were 9. That was kind of the rule. So 4th grade, you're old enough to go to elk camp. And that was a really big deal, like at least to us, it was a huge deal. And so my very first elk hunt, I was 9 years old, and they all had spike tags. It was nothing special. So they had Ukiah spike tags, and we go on this hunt, right? And like I was super stoked about it. I think the irony of this is dad bought it was a 96 Chevy, and it had a CD player in it, right? So I'll never forget, like, this is like the first truck we owned with a CD player, and we bought like a John Anderson greatest hits. So to this day, listening to John Anderson greatest hits reminds me of like the 5-hour elk drive to elk camp, and this is like classic wall tent, set up, go hunting, right? And it was a really big deal. And I'll never forget the first day we go out, and I'm like walking behind dad. I'm being super quiet. My dad would chew my ass every time I stepped on a stick, or like my legs brushed together. Like, so I had a lot of practice of getting yelled at during deer hunting. So when it came to elk hunt, I was like dead silent. I did not want to make a noise. And so I'm just like following dad, and it's opening morning. And I remember looking over, to this day, I still remember, I look over, and, like I'm pretty short, and I'm looking under these trees, and there's a whole herd of elk bedded down. Like, I don't know. I can't remember how far away. We'll say it's like 100 yards away. And I'm like, grabbing dad, and he's like, no way. So first morning of the hunt, I look over, there's a whole herd of elk, and they're all bedded down. And so I grab my dad, and he's like, okay, stay here. And I forget what he did, but he he moves, and all of a sudden the herd gets up, and they all take off. And it's like, we're on the edge of some kind of timber, and then there's a bunch of blowdown and reap rod. And I'm like sitting there, and all these elk go running by me I remember thinking they were going to run me over. It had to have been under 20 yards. Who knows? Right. And all these elk go running by, and like, I want to say, I say we had spike tags, but I do think we must've had hair tags that year. I can't remember. All I remember is that all these elk go running by, and this like big bull, to me, right? I'm 9 years old. This big bull stops right next to me, and then the rest of the herd goes running out, and dad, boom, shoots this spike, and I'm like, oh, this big bull turns and goes the other way, And I'll never forget that. I was like, Dad, there was a big one. He's like, oh, no way, and it was super cool. And I'll never forget, like, we skinned this elk out or whatever. And he's like, all right, you got to pack the head back to camp. And so like, I'm 9, I'm convinced, yeah, like, I will do this. And so I'm having to crawl over blowdown. That's probably like, I don't know, mid belly high, and like carrying this spike head back with me. I probably made it 20 yards, but I was destined to just do it. But yeah, that was my first ever elk hunt. And we were successful, and I got to spot him or whatever. So it was really cool. And since then, man, elk hunting has kind of just been in my blood. I think it always was. Like, my grandpa was an elk hunter, my dad was an elk hunter. And they brought it into me, and I think it just like it evolves from there. But that was the first elk hunt I ever went on.
Did your dad always bring out the head of the spike, or was it just because you had kind of spotted the herd and he's like, it's kind of a rite of passage thing?
Knowing him, he was probably just like, that was like, all right, you got to pack the head out, your first elk hunt or whatever. And so, yeah, I don't remember, if he did on other elk or not. Who knows?
Yeah.
Probably not.
That's a great story, man. That's a great story. I remember it's totally different, but I remember almost being trampled by a herd of elk one time. I was hunting, actually I was scouting for elk, putting up game cameras and stuff in a unit, maybe 2019, maybe 2020, somewhere in there. And we're just walking through the woods. There's like 5 of us, 2 friends that aren't hunters, but I'm like, hey, come along. It's just a good time hiking off trail. And then one other person, and then a herd of like 40 bulls comes charging up, and we just run into each other, and they are on all sides of us, just absolute chaos. But it was all bulls, like nothing but bulls, because it was mid-August. And unfortunately, only one person got their phone out and even took a photo. One photo is all we got. But with live photo, you can actually kind of hold it down on the phone. You could see a decent amount. But it's crazy to have an experience like that, let alone at 9 years old on your first ever hunt, man.
So I guess I'm going to turn this into 4 stories. As I was telling that one, I was like, I know how I'll parlay all of these. So maybe there'll be a rhyme or reason to this methodology here. So fast forward, I get my first elk tag. You're 12 years old in Oregon before you can hunt. And so I get my first elk tag, and we drew hair tags again. And I want to say, like, I could be making this all up, but for the point of the story, it was like, we had hair tags when I was 9, and then they got spike tags every year. And it was a big deal that we had hair tags. And it was the Ukiah unit, and Dad was like destined. He was like, oh, I'm going to shoot a 6-point, like still haven't done it. And I think he was at the point where he's like, okay, I'm going to hold out for a 6-point. And so we actually had, the area where we were when I first shot that spike, those guys, like my dad and my grandpa and his, all their buddies, they had hunted that unit forever. But because they had hair tags, whatever year this was when I was 12, we're like, we're going to this other area because, so-and-so, this is where you hunt big bulls. Right. And so we go in, and so I got my tag, but Dad's like destined to kill a big bull. So he's like basically stuffed me with, I called him Uncle Jim, but it was just a good buddy of my dad's. And so Jim was like, oh, I'll take you or whatever. And so we hunt super hard, and like just can't turn up elk for nothing, and Dad's visibly kind of getting frustrated throughout the week. He's like, can't find a 6-point, can't even find a bull at this point, so we don't see, I don't think we saw elk the whole week. Right. So we bomb back to our old, stomping grounds or whatever. And it's the last day of the hunt and it's raining. Me and Uncle Jim Fox, we go out across this like clear cut essentially. And we're sitting in this big tree. And I remember he's like, I'm on one side of this tree and he's on the other. And I got a 30-06 Remington 30-06. It's got like the sawed off stock. So it's like a youth model. So it's an automatic, and probably a Leupold 3x9 if I had to guess. And so we're sitting against this tree in the rain, and I heard the ground like start to shake, like something, is coming or whatever. And pure luck, but out of the timber pops this spike at like 150 yards, dead sprint across this open area. Right. I don't even remember thinking about it, but I pull up and just shoot this bull, dead run, freehand, 12 years old. Let's just assume this is like 110% luck. boom, and this bull like tumbles, and my uncle like turns around like, what the hell are you shooting at? And like sees this bull getting back up, and like he goes to shoot, and it's just like it's a little bit of chaos. And he misses. And he's like, he just looks at me and goes, I can't believe you hit that damn thing, and I'm like,
Was it was it actually moving when you hit it, or did it like stop?
Oh, dude,
for a
it
second?
was full run.
Oh man.
Yeah, pure luck, right? Just dropped this bull, and we're like, oh man, that's crazy. And so we start kind of walking over there to where it was to see, right? And it had tumbled and rolled right before it got to the timber, essentially. And we get right there, and we're kind of looking around, and sure enough, that bull was right there inside of the brush. And he stands up, and we don't get a shot, and he goes off. And my uncle's like, damn it, we shouldn't have pushed him, we didn't know where he was hit. And so we're looking around, and there's blood, good blood right there. I'm like, okay, let's just wait. I remember like thinking like, I want to get this bull. And so I'm like looking at drops, looking, he's like, you gotta wait. And I'm like, go a little farther. And sure enough, that bull had only gone 20 yards, and he stands up again and takes off. I'm like, oh gosh, dang it. Like, just weren't ready. And my uncle's like, okay, we got to wait. Let's walk back, go get our packs or whatever, and we'll come back. And I think he sent me up to get his pack. He was going to stay there. And I went up, and I saw boot tracks coming down, and I was like, man, those are really fresh. I remember thinking that. And then I get to the road, and I could see where someone had turned around, and I was like, oh, that's weird. And just as I get back down to where he is, like we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, maybe 50 yards from us or 100 yards from us, boom, 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 gunshots are going off. And like, he grabs me, throws me behind a log, and he's like yelling, and then he shoots a riot around.
Jeez.
And we're like, it's chaos or whatever. And we like go around the corner, and these guys are skinning this spike that I had shot. And it was like literally not 30 seconds, maybe a minute after, they had shot, and like, they're right there. And it was super close quarters. And I was like, I remember being bummed, but I was 12. I didn't know any better. And my uncle's like, he's like, well, we shot it. He's like, no, we shot this bull. And it was kind of one of those scenarios. Yeah. And didn't think much of it. My uncle's kind of bummed, and he's like, well, whatever. And we leave, and we get back up to where we were kind of headed back to the truck or whatever. And you could tell where these guys would like turn around. They saw us shoot that bull and walked right down in there. And either they just like shot a couple times and the bull was already dead, or they knew right where it was, and they just like went in and to get it, basically to bump this up and shoot it, because they knew there was a wounded elk. So it was very evident, like post fact, that these guys like were pretty intentional about their actions. And, so we get back, and we run into my dad. My dad's like, oh, what happened? And, my Uncle Jim's like telling, my dad what happened, blah, blah, blah. And Dad's pissed. Like, he's ready to go back down there. Like, this kid just shot this out. Right. Yeah. And I'll never forget where my uncle's like trying to talk him out of it. Like, don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah. We're walking down the road, and we run into one of their buddies, and they all got like these bandanas around their hats. So you kind of like same group. And this poor kid, like, I was only 12, but this kid was like 19, maybe 20. My dad chewed his ass up and down. And I was like, I was afraid for this other kid. And this kid had no idea what was going on,
Oh my God.
But yeah, he's like, my dad's chewing his ass. He's livid. And like, we ended up leaving. So I didn't end up getting that bull. And I was pretty bummed. That's kind of the way, it is. And Oregon has gotten really bad about this. So crazy story. Flash forward a number of years. So after that, I think I rifle elk hunted one more year. And then I was already shooting bows, and all my cousins were big archery hunters. So I started archery, I'm going to say 13 or 14, somewhere in there. Okay. And so like, I just never went back to rifle hunting. And so like, my dad always thought it was funny that me and all the cousins, we all rifle hunted deer and archery hunted elk, which to us made a ton of sense because that was the rut for both of them. And he thought that was the dumbest thing in the world, but we did it. And so I get into archery, and for a lot of years, like through high school and through college, I was kind of like an archery, purist or whatever. I thought I was. I didn't do much rifle hunting. And so we get fast forward. This is like, I'm gonna say, I don't know, 2009 or 10, maybe 2008, somewhere in there. Bunch of my buddies, they're doing a bunch of rifle hunting, and they're horsepacking in and doing some cool stuff. And they're like, hey, come with us, whatever. And so we kind of had a mutual friend that was that drew a tag, and they were all going to this area. So I was like, yeah, I'll go with you. This will be, fun. I haven't done rifle hunting in a lot of years. So this is like my first horseback trip, right? So we horseback in with my buddies, and it was awesome. It was just a totally different experience. Like I had archery hunted a lot, but I hadn't, done the late season rifle thing. And so that same year, this mutual friend goes in with us, and we scout. And I was basically like, hey, where do you guys not hunt? I'll go there and try to find a bull. And so they're like, yeah, go drop off in this canyon. We've never really been there. No one goes there. So you go there. So the day before season, me and this other guy, we drop in there and we found a few bulls, some good bulls, night before season. We're like, cool, opening morning, we're going to be there. So opening morning, we drop in and we're looking for these bulls. I'm like, let's get a little bit closer. And I had shot with this guy before, and his like max range was 500. And this was big canyon country. And we're like, I'm like, man, to get to 500 where these bulls were, is really tough. So we get down in there, and I got the tripod set up, and I was like, all right, Nathan, like they come out right here, like just get ready. Like I know these bulls are right here somewhere. This opening morning, sure enough, like this great bull pops out, and it's like one little sliver. And I'm like, there he is, Nathan. We get set up, and it's like 502 on the dot. And I was like, this is perfect. And boom, he shoots and he misses. I'm like, all right, just stay right on him, just standing there. Boom. And like you watch the bull like buck up, and he just stands there. I'm like, put him in again, shoot him again. And boom, he like bucks up again. And this bull like starts walking a little bit, and like he disappears. But we're like, dude, like we just watched him eat 2 rounds. Like he's done.
Yeah.
And so we're like, all right, cool, high fiving. And
I don't like where this is going based on your last story, but go ahead.
I know it's like the 2 times, like it was like this wasn't a short span, but like this few years later, I go rifle hunting again, and sure enough, like I hear boom, 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 like up by this elk, and I'm like, oh shit, like here it goes again. And I was like, we gotta go now. And like I'm running up this mountain, and so it's only 500 yards, but it is straight up, and I'm like hauling ass. I get up to this elk, or where we had, last seen him, actually where he was standing when we shot. I get there, and there's blood like on the ground, and I could see this bull walked like 20 more yards and was standing there just out of sight of us. But I mean, there's a pile of blood that was, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 feet around. So I'm like, yeah. And then I walk around the corner. It looked like he took like 4 more steps, and this bull like you could see where he just dropped and slid down into this drainage. The brush is all gone. And there's a dude standing there skinning it. And I'm like,
oh my God.
I'm like, hey, buddy, like, think you got my elk? And he's like, nope, screw you. This elk was running up that hill and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, I was like, no offense, but like, I am standing where he was standing last time I saw him. And then he fell from right at this point to where you are. So unless you shot him right here after I shot him, and like at this point, like Nathan's still coming up the hill. I don't even have a gun or anything, but I didn't think much of it. And this guy's like, pointing his Bowie knife at me, and like, he's like, no, this is my elk. And I was like, so getting into like this very heated debate. He's like, why don't you come down here and take it from me? I was like, Jesus Christ, like, how is this a thing again?
Yeah, right.
And so
you said you're like 19 now at this point?
I was probably early 20s at this point. So 2023, 23, 24. Yeah. And I'm like, and I had a lot of experience by this point. Like, I'd killed a number of bulls, and, so a lot more experience than when I was 12 years old. So this is, almost 12 years later. And I'm like, all right, listen, like I know that last person who shoots it gets it, right? But I'm like, you show me where you hit it, and if you put a kill shot in it, it's your bull. Like last shot wins, right? But I'm like, I know we put 2 solid shots on this bull. Like I watched him just get absorbed, and like he only made it 10 yards after we shot, or 20 yards. So I'm like, let's roll him over, and he won't do it. I'm like, roll him over. Like, let's see where, everyone hit. Let's just call it a spade. And we go rounds. Like, this is an hour of an argument. And it's this kid's first bull, right? And I'm like, this is his first bull. And this guy's like, well, I've killed bulls all over. Like, I know so much. I'm like, I don't care. Like, dude, it's his first bull. And, this goes for a while. And finally, he's like, you know what? You can have this bull, blah, 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 blah. I'm talking about how great he is. I'm like, cool, whatever, we got it. And sure enough, like we rolled this bull over and we start skinning it because I was super curious. And it was a weird situation because I roll him over and I didn't see a hole at all. So at first I'm like, he didn't even hit this freaking bull. Like I knew it. Well, then as we were skinning that front shoulder, like where it went in, like I couldn't even tell, but it wasn't even like bloodshot. It was like the bull was dead when he shot it, but he shot it with a 338 and it was like wedged in the front, like it didn't go through the front shoulder, which was really weird to me. I'm like, I don't know if he hit a like limb first or something, but it was definitely not a kill shot. Like didn't go through, like both of ours. I mean, we're just, 10, 12 ring. Nathan made great shots after he calmed down.
Yeah.
So like 100% feel like Nathan killed that bull. We were good. But like, it was just like, yeah, again, like with this like competitive, who shot what, where'd they hit? And I was like, man, this rifle hunting stuff, it's like something else.
Remind me never to rifle hunt in Oregon, man. It seems to be a trend.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's uncommon, especially in Oregon. Hunting pressure is very high, and you get like those situations where there's like it's in the books of like, okay, the last person who shoots this bull before it dies technically gets it. And I think there's people who know that, and so they'll they see someone shoot a bull, they'll go down and was like, just shoot it again, before it dies. It just gets that competitive. And mind you, like this is not like we were road hunting. We were horsebacked in a very long ways, and I had dropped off a pretty damn big mountain. Like this was not, it was just crazy to be like, I'm this far in, and like we're playing who shot what. It was just crazy, crazy story.
That's insane. I don't know how I would react. I don't think I'd be quite as polite as I think you probably were, but yeah. I don't know what I would do in that situation.
Yeah, what would you do? Like someone shoots your elk. What do you do?
I have no idea. Like he asked me to come down. I'm a big guy, so I'd probably go down, right? And like I'm 6'4", 230. I'd probably just walk down and be like, "You really want me to take this from you?" Like, even though I'm a lover, not a fighter, I've never been in a fight, but people.
Yeah, but the dude's got a gun and he's holding a Bowie knife. True. I have nothing. I don't even have a freaking pistol.
That's a good point. That's a good point. That's a real good point. I have no idea. I think it'd have to be one of those things where like I'd black out and then show up at the end and be like, yeah, okay, I didn't handle that very well.
The irony is like, so we got a good friend and that whole group, there's a couple just crusty old cowboys and I love them to death. So one of our old cowboy buddies, he's up at camp, and I was talking to him on the radio and telling him what happened or whatever. And he's a good old boy, right? He's a crusty old cowboy you wouldn't want to mess with. And this guy's mule, so this will tie into this whole story, but this guy's mule gets loose and ends up in our camp. And one of the
crusty
things,
old cowboy or the guy that you ran into?
The guy that stole our elk thief. We called him elk thief for a while. So elk thief's horse ends up in our camp, and Ken's at camp, and the guy comes back and he's like, oh, thanks for catching my mule. He's like, nope, finders keepers. Like he's giving this guy hell about keeping his horse. This our crusty old cowboy friend. He's like, nope, it's my mule now. He's like, I found it.
Did he know that he was the same guy?
Yeah, we knew.
That's awesome.
Karma.
How long did he hold out before giving the guy his horse back?
I don't know, quite a while. And Ken can give people a wrath of shit, so he's pretty good at that. So he gave him a lot of, and the guy was super, apologetic or whatever. I don't know if it was just the heat of the moment or whatever, but it was a interesting situation to say the least.
Yeah, that's a crazy story, man. And the fact that it's happened to twice, I don't think I've heard that. I mean, I've obviously heard a lot of stories. I don't think I've heard that happening to anyone except you, and it's happened twice. So,
happened on my first bull, and happened on a good friend of mine's at his first bull. So, yeah, it definitely happens. But so fast forward, like that was the first year I started horseback hunting, and I was hooked. I loved finding old bulls and just going. Like I never really had that tag because it was always archery hunting. So that was probably I don't remember what year that was. I can look it up, but it's like, I'm going to say 2008 or 9, one of those years. I can't remember. Anyway, so I started horseback hunting with those guys, and we went in a number of times. We had great success. We killed a lot of bulls over the years, and I really enjoyed the horseback and stuff. And so fast forward to 2016, I was getting ready to leave Oregon and move to Montana. And I was like, I'm going to cash in my points. So we had another buddy who were like, had enough points that I could get a tag if I partnered with him, whatever. And so that was kind of the deal. It was always like, hey, if you can get someone to get you, you can only bring a friend. So we have this core group of buddies, and the rule was like, you can only bring someone if they have enough points to get someone in the group a tag. So we had this buddy, we're like, all right, we'll bring you in, So 2016, I had the tag, and we had pulled a lot of bulls out by that point. We'd done a lot of horseback. We knew the area pretty well. And we go in, and actually a good buddy of mine, we were going to ride in a week early. So it was one of those deals, Oregon's like a week-long hunt, but we always like, ideally you go in a week early and you got your bull picked out for opening morning. Like, we're good to go. This is the one. So we ride in, we set up camp, and my buddy rides back out. He's like, oh, I'll see you in a week. So we're basically just going to live in there for a week. We're going to have every bull, cataloged. We're going to know where they are. And when the rest of the crew comes back in, I think we had 4 tags that year. We're like, we'll tell you where everything is. So we do that. I think we looked over 110 bulls or something like that.
Wow.
And so we had a lot of bulls picked out. We kind of knew where everything was. We're like, good to go. And so season comes, and we're like, the 2 bulls that we wanted were actually together. There's 2 good bulls together. So me and my buddy were going to like drop in on those. And then we're like, hey, right where the, bull thief killed that other bull, there was another group of bulls that were like, hey, that's a good spot. I think Ken, the old crusty cowboy, he had a tag that year. So 2 of our buddies, they were like Friday night, Friday, they came in. And so Friday night, we're like, hey, right where Nathan killed his bull, there's a couple good bulls. Go take a look at those, see if they're still there. And so they were going to drop in that night, and we were going to go watch our bulls. We'd been watching our 2 bulls for a couple of days and just kind of babysitting them. And so, we're ready to go. And what was it? I'm trying to remember now. So anyway, long story short, opening morning, we drop in to our hole, and 1, 2, 3, these bulls. It was kind of a rodeo. So I was shooting a sharps, and so this is the year I killed that bull with the sharps. And the bull that I originally found, we called Yuma, because we thought he was about 310. So we called him Yuma. He ended up going like 330, but Yuma and this other bull were together. But I could only shoot like 250 yards. So we slip in, we kind of know right where they're at. We've been watching for days, and right at daylight is right there. And I was like, one bull would be in the open, but the other one wouldn't be. And then, like Yuma was right there, and he was, under 200 yards. I'm like, perfect. But the other bull would be hiding. And then the other bull would pop out, and you would be behind some trees. And so we're like playing this game and just feeling like, okay, I got to get it done. And I don't know, probably 20 or 30 minutes of this goes by. And I'm like, all right, let's just switch, because now the other bull was, I think, under 200, but Yuma was out a little bit, but they were both out. The Yuma bull was outside of my sharps range. So we're like, all right, well, 1, 2, 3 it. And so we go down and 1, 2, 3 it. And I shoot. And what was it? Oh, like my safety was on or something on the sharps, it has like a safety lever. And like we had to jockey around and do stuff to switch bulls. And so like I get set up, and like I click, and it just like slam, like it just goes click, and so my buddy, he shoots, boom, like he hears that and he shoots. So now I'm trying to shoot a bull after like someone has already shot with the sharps. So I shoot, boom, hit this bull, and he's running, and I'm like trying to move with the sharps. It was a total absolute rodeo. But we got it done. We killed 2 bulls, one with the sharps, killed a good 6 point with the sharps, which is kind of always a goal of mine. And he killed that Yuma bull. And so we're stoked, right? But now the work begins. We're in a hole. We got 2 bulls down. We're like, okay, we can get horses to, this point. So let's just get stuff worked up today. We'll get all the way around this bend where that trail is, and we can get a horse to there. So it's a long day. We get pictures, we do everything, and 2 bulls on a mountain is always, a workload, but we get them worked up, spend the entire day. I think we got back to camp that night. I'm going to guess like 8 or 9. It was after dinner, it was a long day, and we shot these bulls at daylight. So, but everything should be, pretty much ready to go. I think we had like one more load to bring over to the horses. So we get back to camp, and of course it's beers and whiskeys, and we're like, yeah, high fives and whatnot. And so we're sitting there, and Jake's uncle's there, and we're high five, and they had dinner. No one's seen anybody all day except us. So we get back, and Jake's uncle's like, oh man, I haven't heard from the boys all day, whatever. And I'm like, oh, they're fine, they're big boys, and don't think much about it. And I drink a few more beers, and then I get a phone, like we don't have service, but like a couple random spots, and I get a phone call, and it's one of my best friends, Jake, and it's just like, Cody. And I was like, That's all I got. And I was like, damn it. Like, that's not
Yeah.
good. Like, you just know your buddies. And like,
Yeah.
first of all, that's not how that conversation ever starts.
Yeah. And they know where you are, and it's not time to have just a casual conversation.
Yeah. And it's not like, it doesn't start with my first name, like, and so I'm like, so, and it's late. Like at this point, it's probably 11 or midnight. We haven't heard, I just get like one phone call and like, just, hey, Cody. And it was like, okay. So I load up some waters. I load up a sleeping bag, some meals and stuff. And I just start heading out where I kind of knew where they were, rough area, but I start heading down the trail. And sure enough, I run into, Jake and Stuart, and they're like, hey, Kyle's not good. And it's his little brother. And so Kyle's like dehydrated. So Kyle's the little brother, and for context, like anybody who has a little brothers always try to keep up with big brothers. And, he didn't drink water all day. And like, it just got to the point where he was just completely smoked. So he's like, man, Kyle, like he was kind of stumbling and kicking. Like, we didn't know what the heck was going on. Like, what are you doing? And pretty soon he was like slurring his words. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, like something really bad is happening. And they're like, let's build a fire. And so they built a fire, and he was like going downhill. So like they, of course, these guys had like one water bottle between all of them. And and so, and they're like, yeah, he's not doing good. Cousin Dave's down there. And so like I come back and I get a bunch of noon tabs and water and all this. I'm like, oh, I'll find him. And so he's like, well, when you break over to the cliffs, like you'll see a fire way, way, way down there. I'm like, oh, perfect. Like they came up through a cliffed out section. So here I am, like I very little sleep already, worked my ass off all day, packing 2 bowls. And now I'm dropping off at midnight to find, our buddy.
A few beers deep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Super hydrated. C minuses all day. And so I drop off, and sure enough, like I see this fire. I'm like, oh gosh, like this is not good. And so I drop way down in there, and he's like right in the cliffs. I had to go around multiple cliffed out sections, like in the middle of the night. It's blowing sideways. So I get him, and we get some noon tabs in him, get water in him, get a meal in him. And I can tell, like, I'm like, okay, we're spending the night here. Cause Kyle doesn't even know where we are. Like he's super confused about what's going on. I was like, we'll just sleep on the mountain. We'll figure it out. So, I'm in I would struggle to call it a mule deer bed. We put Kyle basically in this like, not tree well, but like this dead snag, like there was a V, so he couldn't fall down the mountain if, he rolled over or something. So we basically just had him like in this tree. Yeah. So he's in a sleeping bag, and he's doing better, but like definitely not, we got to climb another almost 1,000 feet vert better. And so I'm like, all right. So we keep fire going, and it was so cold. It was so brutal. It blew like crazy all night. I don't know how many times my sleeping bag would like about blow off the mountain and I'd grab it. It was just like trying to keep the fire going. I didn't sleep hardly a wink. And cousin Dave was like propped up. He was just laying in this rock gap. It's so steep that he was like basically laying in a cliff chute and like trying to sleep. It was terrible. So like, I'm like, oh man. So morning, get up. Kyle's doing a little better. We hike up. And as soon as we get up, like get breakfast, whatever. And my Stuart's like, he's got horses saddled. They're ready to go get that meat or whatever. So he's like, here, have a pancake. We're leaving right now. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I haven't slept yet. So I was like, I gotta they're leaving with horses, which means I gotta bomb off and get that last load over to where the horses are going to be before they get there. Right. Or before we get loaded up. So there's I get there, and I drank my entire water just getting down there. I only took like 1 Nalgene, and I'm smoked. And I get this meat over, and I get there, and they're showing up with horses. And I was like, Stuart, did you bring any water? And he's like, nope, got Keystones. I'm like, dude, I haven't slept in 36 hours. Like, I'm so dehydrated, so tired. And he's like, he hands me a Keystone. He's like, quit being a pussy. And I'm like, God damn it. It's like
a water sounds
so good right now. The last thing I want to drink is a Keystone. And so, whatever. So this whole thing, like this whole story is like, it's a rodeo already. A week before we left on this hunt, my sister was going to go. And at this point, we had mules, horses, everything. And my sister was all stoked to go, and she bought this other mule, but the mule came up lame. I forget what the story was. Something about when the ferry was out, like they're like, oh yeah, we can't take this mule. So my sister gets all excited and she buys this mule off Craigslist, $1,000. Now, that might sound like this is a terrible idea, but at this point, like we had gone through a lot of years where my buddy would go to the Woodburn auction and buy whatever mules were for sale, and we'd go pack with them. Like that was just kind of the way it went. Like we expected rodeos. Like we were pretty poor, cheap, like whatever you want to call it. Like we didn't have fancy horses. We just like went to the Woodburn auction, got whatever we could, and then made it work. Like it was very few years without a rodeo. And so like we're like, oh great, $1,000 Craigslist mule. This should be a good idea. Like what could possibly go wrong here? And we packed in with that mule, and it was fine for the most part. But as soon as we got down where the blood was, that we realized why it's $1,000 Craigslist mule, and this mule does not do blood, right? And so we're on a hill that is, when I say like this country, there's not a flat spot on it. Like this is about the levelest spot we could, and it was still steep. So we're trying to load animals, and it is just all get out steep. This mule is having none of it. It's trying to box us in the face. Like it's trying to do everything. We got this thing wrapped around trees. Like there's no version of this where we just like say, you know what, mule, you're not going to pack meat, because we're already here and we got 2 freaking elk to pack out. So like everyone's got to pack meat. Like it's the end of conversation. So this is its own gong show, fighting this Craigslist mule, but we get it all loaded up. And so we get it loaded up. We're like, let's head up the mountain, And this whole thing was like, we brought my buddy who he's ridden horses, but not a ton. And so he's on my horse and I'm on one of our buddies is like, let's call it extras, the extra pony. And so we call this horse the Mexican dancing pony. And this reason it's called the Mexican dancing pony, because it actually was. I don't know if you guys like, when you see a Mexican dancing pony, they like the way they trot, they like do this like funny dance thing, right? So I'm on the biggest gong show of a rodeo is like, I'm on a Mexican dancing pony. I have my mule, which is Gobe, who's like rock solid, but he's old. And I have the Craigslist mule. And we're trying to like, so this is, I don't think we brought 8 or 9 horses down there or mules down there. And so it is a rodeo going up through like brush trails, whatever. And every time like we have to go up a section, the Mexican dancing pony is like hitting the NOS button. So he'll get all rammed up and just like shoot up through these mountains. And like, I got this ancient mule that's like behind me. And then behind him strapped on is like this rodeo of a show. So like, I am a rodeo out the gate all day. Like, this is just like super good. Like I'm loving life right now. Yeah. And so we get up the mountain and finally, things level out once we get up, and it's not too terrible. We kind of get it up. So we get all the way to camp. I still haven't slept yet. And we come up with this great idea that, there's a truck camp not that far away. And at truck camp are where all the old cowboys are eating steak and beer. And we're like, we're already loaded. Let's go all the way to truck camp. Like mine's well, famous last words, which is, it's not that big of a deal. Once you get on the trail, it's like, we can be to camp in 2 hours. So it's like, it's 2 more hour ride. It's not that big of a deal. Like we'll just hit the camp and we can have steaks tonight. Sounds great. So we roll out, and of course, it's basically riding in the dark. So we're riding in the dark, and I'm on Mexican dancing pony. Like about half the trail is me dallied to my mule, who's like refusing between the mule behind him that's having a freak out, and the Mexican dancing pony who's going down the trail sideways about most of the night. So this is kind of how my night's going. Like, I'm just like, I'm ready to be over this.
Yeah. In my head, I know out of Mexican dancing pony, how they dance. I could just see you going down the path like that.
Yeah. But like, imagine that strapped to a tugboat. And then on the other end of the tugboat is like a monkey that's just like freaking out. So this is pretty much my night. So, and they're like, we get to the section where there's kind of no stopping. It's a little bit tight. It's nothing crazy, but you don't ideally no stopping on it. And so I was like, hey, the saddle on the Craigslist mule, we called him Black Doug. So we're like, hey, the saddle on Black Doug is rolling a little bit. I'm gonna throw a rock in it. And so like, I get off, and so like for those you guys weren't packing, essentially like is though if the weight's not perfectly level, essentially like over time, as they're dancing or moving or any kind of just down the trail, slowly your saddle will start to drift to one side or the other. And so what you can do is just like you throw a 1 pound rock in the opposite side. So it kind of levels it out. So you like fix it a little bit and put a rock in it. Like ideally, like your pack should be perfectly equal so they don't move. Right. And so when I say I'm just going to throw a rock in his pack, and that's why it's because it's starting to roll a little bit and I don't want to have to deal with it on like a one track. So essentially like I can't really do anything once I get on this one track. So before we get to that, I stop and I'm like reaching out because I got, trying to hold on to this crazy horse. And like I reaching out to put a rock in his pack. And as soon as I put that rock in his pack, it just grenades, like the whole thing blows up in my face. And so like that, everyone spooks, like, whoosh, it blows up and they all go running down through the string, which is like the worst thing that can happen in the middle of the night. And, one of the guys grabs Mexican dancing pony right there. It wasn't a big deal, but, my mule, McGobe, he's the big mule. He kind of went around the corner and just stopped. He was like, wasn't me, he knows. And then, the Craigslist mule was gone. And so we're on the trail. And generally when this happens, like if you're on the trail to the truck, it's not an issue. They usually just go back to the truck. They kind of know where home is. It's like, you ever heard the term, don't point a horse toward the barn, because like it'll just go to the barn. Yeah. Kind of the same thing. So we weren't thinking much about it. We're like, as soon as we get service, we're like, hey, should have, one coming in hot. We got guys at the truck, so it's not a big deal. So we're like, hey, we got a loose one coming in without us, essentially. And so we keep riding through the night. We get back to camp. We're like, hey, no sign of the loose mule. And no, nothing. Like, oh, that's weird. So we stay up and we're up. We're waiting and kind of just sitting at the trailhead and waiting for this mule to come. Because, sometimes they'll just be off and then he'll follow the rest of them, right? Pretty standard. But nothing. And pretty soon another group comes through pretty late. And we're like, you guys see a mule at all? And they're like, no, I didn't see anything. Huh. So we stay up pretty late that night. And I'm like, I'm going to bed. So I went to sleep. We get in the next morning. We had to like ride back in to get the next load, get all the stuff. Right. So we ride in and man, we looked everywhere. Not a sign of it. Like even where like it took off, or like try to track it, couldn't see anything. No packs. It was kind of weird. Like this trail is like, it's just on a ridge. So it's like pretty easy to like, okay, either they went to the truck or they went to where our camp was. There's a bunch of hay there. So, next best option would be at the camp. Go to camp, nothing. We break down camp. We look all over, like nothing, no sign of this mule. We're like, what the heck? So I had a buddy that was outfitting and he actually works the ranch kind of in the area. And so I was like, hey, keep an eye out as you're guiding, like we're missing a mule. Generally speaking, these things like they pop up, they show up at a ranch or something like that. So didn't think much of it. Nothing from this mule. And I'm like, that's so weird.
And he was loaded down with meat, right?
No, he was loaded down with all my sister's gear. So perfectly put all my sister's gear on one mule and he checked out. So she lost like $3,000 in gear. And so, and she wasn't even there. So that's the comical part. She left at some point. She was there when I shot the bull, but she left to go shoot photographs for a wedding. And so I was like, we'll pack all your stuff out. You just ride out and we'll carry everything. Okay, we got this.
Perfect.
So this mule goes missing. It was kind of like, oh, must have died or eaten by a wolf or something. Never know. Long story short is the next spring, over that winter, one of the worst winters we've had, like 5 feet of snow in this area. Just there's no way. Right. And we get a message. It was like a message on Facebook. My sister saw it and she's like, hey, lost mule. She's like, hey, it's Black Doug. He turned back up. And so we're like, no way, crazy. So one of our buddies goes over spring bear hunting and he's like, yeah, I saw him. We get a spotting scope picture of him, and he goes, I called him and like, he came running up, got to like 10 feet of me and bolted like he was gone again. So he's like, I couldn't find him. Like he was right there. And then I was like, wouldn't come, he just became, feral essentially. So don't hear anything of him. This is like 2 or 3 people saw him and then don't hear anything about him. And like 3 weeks goes by and then like 15 or 20 miles away, there's a guy that lives off the land. He's like, basically I can't think the guy's name. There's a TikTok guy that does this too. And I think he knew him, but the guy's name was Colin. He like lived with his horses, kind of just traveled all over. Well, this guy ends up with the mule. Right. And so he gets a hold of someone And long story short, we ended up trading a sack of potatoes and a salt lick for this mule back because the guy found the mule and we're like, hey, what do you need? And you're like, you want money or something? He's like, no. He's like, I need some potatoes and a salt lick, whatever. Like, absolutely, gotcha.
You're like, done. That's crazy.
So ended up
that
trading
crazy winter.
Yeah, and
Just
he made it to the
unharmed?
winter, like with the elk. Yeah, I mean, still wearing his lead, no saddle. Like there's a
Okay.
Ray Hole saddle somewhere out there, and all my sister's gear, no one's ever found yet. But no saddle on him. He managed to get out of that, but he was still wearing a lead rope. So yeah, rough
That's
winter.
crazy. That is a crazy story from start to finish, from shooting the 2 elk till the next season, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was quite the journey. Yeah, and so yeah, that poor mule. He
Yeah.
lives in Eastern Oregon now.
Have you tried packing with him again or no?
No, well, actually, so we had a friend that went and picked him up and traded the potato or whatever, and we're like, you can keep that mule, he's yours. So he, I don't know, I don't even know how that one turned out.
That's funny, man. That's great. Well, Cody, man, I don't know if you have one more story or not. You did mention 4, and I feel like we're at 3, but I've taken up the time that I've
4.
asked it. That was 4. Okay, perfect. Well, then this is the perfect time. Let's wrap this thing up, man. I want to say thank you again, of course, for joining us and sharing your stories. Those are very unique, and I like how they all kind of tied together. That was pretty awesome. But why don't you tell the people where they can find you again, real quick, in case they want to learn more a little bit about what you're doing with your podcast and all the different stuff that you got going on.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys are into elk hunting, check out the Elk Hunt podcast. It's kind of where it's a home for all the elk hunting podcasts I've done over the years. A lot of old stuff from the Rich Outdoors, from Wapiti Wednesday, when we did all of that stuff. So kind of just a one place for everything, and there'll be new episodes coming out here too. We do new episodes on the Patreon, and those are going to get put on the Elk Hunt feed. So if you guys are interested, check out the Elk Hunt. If you like it, leave me a review. That's all I ask. But yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate the time, man.
Awesome, man. This was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed,
yeah.
reliving your stories. So, cool, guys. Well, I'll put links to all of Cody's stuff in the show notes. So if you want to find him quick and easy, there it is. But Cody, thank you, man. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you.
Absolutely, buddy.
All right, guys. That's it. Another couple stories in the books. I want to thank Cody, of course, for coming on the podcast. Couldn't have done it without him. And I want to thank Cody for just putting all the stuff out there that he does. It's a ton of great information, from entrepreneurship to hunting. And again, I strongly recommend, if you guys are listening, to check him out. He's one of my go-to listens. So whatever that's worth to you. That being said, guys, everything you need to know about Cody is in the show notes. Check out those links. Now get out there and, of course, share the podcast with some folks and give us a review, whether that's on Spotify or Apple. The better or the more reviews we have, the more people find us naturally. And that means more people coming to me saying, man, I got a crazy story for you. So that's it. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really do appreciate you. Again, Cody, thank you, of course, for coming on. Everybody get out there and you know what to do. Make some stories of your own. Thank you.